The auction house smelled of desperation and expensive cologne, a combination that made Kessa's stomach turn. Or perhaps that was just the knowledge that she was the merchandise today. She smoothed her iridescent feathers with one wing hand, a nervous gesture she immediately regretted. A diplomat of the Etherian collective did not show weakness, even when facing debt slavery. The auction room was smaller than she'd imagined, though no less humiliating for it. Rows of seats curved in a semicircle around a raised platform where she would soon stand, while strangers bid on her 5-year labor contract. The Collectors Guild had been very clear. Her diplomatic immunity meant nothing when measured against 200,000 credits of unpaid medical debt. Her mother's treatment had cost everything, and in the end, it hadn't even saved her. Kessa held her head high, her crest feathers rigid with forced dignity. At least the contracts were regulated. She would serve her term in whatever capacity her purchaser demanded, but she couldn't be physically harmed, and after 5 years her debt would be cleared. 5 years. She was 32. She'd be 37 when she was free again, if she survived with her sanity intact. The other lots waited in adjoining rooms, but through the transparisteel partition Kessa could see them. A Thorgian male with the slumped shoulders of defeat. A young Centauri female who couldn't stop crying. A human, surprisingly, though she supposed economic disaster played no favorites with species. They were all here for the same reason: debts too large to pay, and the Collectors Guild's generous offer of indentured servitude instead of prison. She turned away from them. Looking wouldn't help. Each of them would face this alone. The auction house's waiting area had refreshments, a grotesque touch of civility, as if serving tiny sandwiches and sparkling water made this anything other than what it was. Kessa poured herself water with a steady hand. Her flight feathers were immaculately preened, her plumage showing the deep blues and purples that marked her as high-caste Etherian. Let them see what they were buying, let them know she was no common laborer. The main doors swished open, and Kessa instinctively assessed the newcomer. It was what she'd been trained to do as a diplomat: read a room, catalogue potential allies and threats. This was neither. The human who shuffled through the doors wore coveralls that might have been blue once, but had faded to a color that could only be described as used. Stains decorated the fabric like abstract art. His hair stuck up in several directions, graying and unkempt. He carried a battered datapad that looked like it had survived a war, and his boots squeaked on the polished floor, leaving faint marks that made the auction house attendant wince. Kessa's beak curved into an involuntary smile of derision. The maintenance entrance must be broken if the janitorial staff was coming through the front. The human glanced around the room with mild, almost sleepy eyes. His gaze passed over her without interest, and he made his way to the refreshment table. He picked up a sandwich, examined it with the intensity of a scientist discovering a new element, and took an enormous bite. Crumbs scattered down his coveralls to join the existing stains. "Excuse me," Kessa said, her voice carrying the melodic overtones of her species, but sharpened with authority. "I believe the service staff has a separate area. This space is for auction attendees and merchandise." The human looked at her, still chewing. Up close, she could see his eyes were a pale grey, almost colourless, unremarkable in every way. He swallowed. "The sandwiches are the same in both areas, I'd imagine." Nevertheless, Kessa gestured with one wing toward the door. "Maintenance can wait until after the proceedings." "Can it?" The human took another bite of his sandwich. "That seems inefficient. What if something breaks during? Then I'm sure you'll be called." Kessa turned away, dismissing him. She had enough to worry about without explaining basic protocols to cleaning staff. "Probably," the human agreed amicably. He poured himself water using the same crystal glass she'd used. Kessa resisted the urge to shudder. Then he did something that shocked her. He sat down in the attendee seats, right in the middle row, as if he belonged there. "What are you doing?" Kessa demanded. "Sitting," he said. "My feet hurt. Do your feet ever hurt? Wait, you have talons. Do talons hurt? You cannot sit there. Those seats are for registered bidders." The human patted his pockets, found a crumpled piece of paper, and held it up. Even from a distance, Kessa could see the official auction house seal, a registration confirmation, her crest feathers flattened in confusion. "You're bidding? That's generally why people register." "On what?" "The industrial equipment auction is next week." The human's expression didn't change. "Is it? I'll have to check my calendar." Before Kessa could respond, the auction house attendant, a Prelian with the perpetually worried expression typical of his species, scurried over to the human. "Sir, I'm sorry, but there's been some confusion. Your registration code is flagged as—" The Prelian glanced at his datapad, then at the human, then back at the datapad. His skin tone shifted to a pale yellow. I apologize for the interruption. Please let me know if you need anything at all." The Prelian practically fled. Kessa stared. What kind of registration code made a guild attendant react like that? Unless... No, impossible. The human was clearly destitute. Those coveralls weren't an affectation. They were genuinely worn through in places. There was a hole near his knee that had been inexpertly patched with a different fabric entirely. His datapad was held together with what appeared to be actual tape. More bidders began arriving. Kessa recognized the type immediately. Labor contractors, looking for skilled workers they could exploit legally. Mining corporations, always hungry for bodies to throw into dangerous extraction operations. A few private individuals, probably seeking domestic servants or personal assistants, they could pay below market rates. They all gave the shabby human a wide berth, though Kessa noticed several of them glancing at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to what almost looked like recognition. But that couldn't be right. What would these wealthy corporations have to do with a janitor? "Lot 17, please report to staging," a melodious voice announced over the intercom. That was her. Lot 17. Not Kessa Thanewing, former cultural attaché to 3 Systems. Not Kessa, who had brokered the trade agreement between the Centauri Collective and the Free Merchants. Just Lot 17. She walked to the staging area with her head high, her talons clicking against the floor in a rhythm she forced to remain steady. Behind the curtain, she could hear the auctioneer wrapping up Lot 16, the Thorgian male. His contract went for 30,000 credits to a mining concern. 5 years of his life, sold for the price of a used shuttle. Then it was her turn. The lights were brighter than she'd expected, turning her plumage into a shimmering display of color despite her circumstances. She stood at the center of the platform, wings held loosely at her sides, and stared at a point on the back wall. If she didn't look at their faces, she could almost pretend this wasn't happening. "Lot 17, the auctioneer began, his voice professionally cheerful. Etherian female, age 32, fluent in 17 languages, diplomatic training, cultural consultation experience. Contract term, 5 years. Debt obligation, 200,000 credits. Bidding starts at 40,000. A pause. Kessa's heart sank. Was she worth so little that no one would even open the bidding? 40,000 from Corsair Mining, the auctioneer announced, relief evident in his voice. 45,000 Stellar Hospitality Group. 50,000 Corsair Mining. The bids climbed slowly. 55, 60, 65. Kessa allowed herself to hope it might be the Hospitality Group. That wouldn't be so bad, would it? Cultural consultant for a hotel chain. She could do that. She could survive that. 70,000 Corsair Mining. The Hospitality Group didn't counter. Kessa's hope withered. Corsair Mining. She'd heard of them. They operated asteroid extraction operations in the outer system, places where the law was flexible and accidents were common. They didn't need a diplomat. They needed someone educated enough to manage workers and desperate enough not to complain about conditions. "Any other bids?" the auctioneer asked. 70,000 going once? 200,000 credits. The voice was male, human, and utterly calm. Kessa's eyes snapped to the crowd despite herself. The shabby human had his hand raised. His expression was as mild as if he were ordering breakfast. Laughter rippled through the auction room. Even the auctioneer smiled, though he tried to hide it. "Sir," the auctioneer said with exaggerated patience, "you need to have verified funds to bid. This isn't registration code Alpha 77 Kappa Null 3, the human said. The auctioneer's expression froze. He glanced at something on his podium, and the color drained from his face. Yes, sir. 200,000 from—" He paused, confusion evident. "From the registered bidder. That covers the debt obligation entirely. Any counter bids?" The auction room had gone silent. The representative from Corsair Mining was frantically typing on his datapad, his expression shifting from annoyance to shock to something that might have been fear. "Going once," the auctioneer said weakly. "Twice." He seemed to be waiting for someone to wake him from a dream. "Sold to registration Alpha 77 Kappa Null 3 for 200,000 credits. Kessa's world tilted. The human had just bought her freedom. No, not her freedom, her contract. She would still serve 5 years, but by paying her debt in full, Why would he do that? Labor contracts were purchased at fractional rates, with the guild taking the difference. No one paid full price. That was the point. It was exploitation with a legal framework. She was led off the platform in a daze, through the processing area, where documents were signed and verified. The human was already there, stylus in hand, scrawling his signature on digital documents without reading them. "Identity verification required for debt transfer," the clerk said, and Kessa heard the tremor in his voice. "Name for the contract records, sir." "Marcus Webb," the human said. The name meant nothing to Kessa. Should it? The way everyone was acting, it should. The clerk processed the final documents, and then Kessa found herself standing in the auction house lobby with her new owner. Contract holder, whatever the correct term was. Marcus Webb looked at her with those mild grey eyes. "Do you have things to collect? From wherever you were staying?" Kessa's voice came out strangled. She cleared her throat, tried again. "I don't understand what just happened. You were in an auction. I bid. I won. That's generally how auctions work. You paid full price. The debt was 200,000. Seemed simpler to clear it entirely. But Kessa gestured at his coveralls, his battered datapad, his entire shabby existence. "You can't possibly have that kind of money." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Can't I? I saw you walk in here. You look like you sleep in a maintenance closet." Maintenance closets are surprisingly comfortable, good temperature control. His expression didn't change, but Kessa had the unsettling feeling he was laughing at her. "You didn't answer my question. Do you have belongings to collect?" Kessa's mind reeled. Nothing about this made sense. The registration code that made guild officials turn pale, the way corporate representatives avoided eye contact with him, the casual deployment of 200,000 credits. "Who are you?" she demanded. "I told you, Marcus Webb." "That means nothing to me." "Good," Marcus said, and this time she was certain there was amusement in those bland eyes. "Let's keep it that way. Now belongings?" Kessa had a single bag at the temporary housing the guild provided for merchandise. Her entire life had compressed into one bag. Everything else had been sold to pay down the debt, though it hadn't made a dent. 30 minutes later, she was in a transport with Marcus Webb, flying through the city's airways toward an unknown destination. The transport itself was a study in contradictions. From the outside, it looked like a maintenance vehicle, battered and forgettable. Inside, the seats were real leather, and the control panel had tech that wouldn't be commercially available for another 5 years. "Where are we going?" Kessa asked. "My place. You'll need somewhere to stay. What do you want from me?" The question came out sharper than she intended, edged with all the fear she'd been suppressing. "What are my duties?" Marcus glanced at her. Duties. You own my contract, 5 years of labor. What do you want me to do? Huh, Marcus said, as if this genuinely hadn't occurred to him. I hadn't really thought about it. You paid 200,000 credits and didn't think about it? I was more focused on making sure Corsair Mining didn't get you. Do you know what their safety record is? It's appalling. They had 17 worker deaths last quarter alone. 17! And the guild still lets them bid on contracts. The whole system is rotten. Kessa stared at him. You bought my contract to save me from a mining corporation. Seemed like the thing to do. That's insane. Is it? Marcus navigated the transport around a cargo hauler. You would have preferred the asteroid mining? No, but Kessa's feathers ruffled in agitation. Normal people don't just spend 200,000 credits on strangers. I'm not particularly normal, Marcus agreed. Fair warning on that front. The transport descended into a residential district. Not the gleaming towers of the wealthy, but not the slums either. Middle-tier housing, the kind occupied by skilled workers and mid-level professionals. The building Marcus landed on top of was 40 stories, respectable but unremarkable. His apartment was on the 32nd floor. Kessa had expected, she didn't know what she'd expected, squalor, perhaps, given his appearance, or maybe hidden luxury, if the mystery of his registration code meant what she was starting to suspect. What she got was aggressively average. The apartment was clean but cluttered. The furniture looked comfortable and well used. Books, actual physical books, overflowed from shelves and formed precarious towers on every surface. The kitchen was small but well equipped. Through an open door, she could see a bedroom with an unmade bed. Another door led to what was presumably a second bedroom. Guest rooms through there, Marcus said, pointing. Bathrooms shared, but I'm not home most of the time anyway, so it shouldn't be a problem. Kitchens fully stocked. Help yourself to anything. Kessa's crest feathers were flat against her skull, a sign of complete confusion. This is where you live? For the past 8 years, yes. But you have millions! The words burst out before she could stop them. Because the registration code, the reactions, the casual spending, it all pointed to one impossible conclusion. Marcus went very still. Oh, what makes you say that? Your registration code. The way the guild staff reacted. The Corsair Mining representative looked terrified when he looked you up. You're not just wealthy, you're... Kessa's mind raced through databases she'd accessed as a diplomat, matching patterns and rumors. The only registration codes that start with Alpha 7 are Platinum-tier accounts. The Guild only issues those to individuals with verified assets over 50 million credits. Marcus set down his battered datapad. When he looked at her, the mild expression was gone, replaced by something sharper, calculating. "You're very observant," he said quietly. "I was a cultural attaché. It was my job to read people and situations." Kessa's heart was pounding. "Who are you? Really?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed, and the sharpness faded back into that unremarkable blandness. "Do you follow financial news?" he asked. "Not particularly. That's good. Most people don't." Marcus moved to the kitchen and started making tea, of all things. "About 12 years ago, I was a maintenance tech on a cargo station. Decent pay, boring work. I kept the environmental systems running, fixed broken doors, that sort of thing." Kessa remained standing, her bag still clutched in her wing hands. "I was good with systems," Marcus continued, his back to her as he waited for the water to boil. "Started noticing patterns in the cargo manifests. Which routes were profitable, which ones weren't. Which companies were efficient, which ones were bleeding money. Started doing some calculations in my spare time. Made some investments." "Some investments," Kessa repeated. "They did well." Marcus poured hot water over tea leaves with the care of a ceremony. "Very well. I reinvested, made more. Within 5 years, I had enough to never work again. Within 10, I had more money than I could spend in several lifetimes." "So you kept dressing like a janitor?" Marcus turned, offering her a cup of tea. I like dressing like a janitor, still do. It's comfortable, practical, and people ignore you, which is wonderful. Kessa took the tea automatically. It smelled like chamomile and something floral she didn't recognize. People ignore you, she echoed. While you do what exactly? Help, Marcus said simply. He sat down on his worn couch with his own tea. The system we live in, the guild, the corporate structure, the debt laws, it's designed to trap people. You get sick, you go into debt. You try to start a business, you go into debt. You make one mistake, and suddenly you're facing years of servitude to pay it off. It's legal slavery with extra steps. And you just buy people out? Sometimes. Other times I pay off their debts anonymously. Sometimes I invest in their businesses so they can avoid the predatory lenders. Sometimes I manipulate markets to drive exploitative companies into bankruptcy. He said it the way someone might describe a hobby. Whatever seems most effective in the situation. Kessa sat down slowly, her legs suddenly unsteady. Why? Why not? That's not an answer. Marcus looked at her over his tea. My mother went into debt when I was young. Medical bills. She worked 3 jobs trying to pay them off, and it still wasn't enough. I watched her work herself to death, literally, trying to satisfy creditors who kept adding fees and interest. She died when I was 15. The debt didn't. I inherited it. That's illegal now, Kessa said softly. It is. I helped make it illegal. Anonymously funded 3 different legislative campaigns to change inheritance debt laws. Marcus's voice was matter-of-fact. But it doesn't bring her back. So I do what I can for other people. The apartment was quiet except for the ambient hum of the city outside. Kessa stared at this strange, shabby human who apparently held more wealth than some planetary governments. How many? She asked. How many what? People. How many have you helped? Marcus shrugged. I don't keep count. A few thousand, probably. Maybe more. A few thousand, Kessa repeated faintly. The number was staggering. The money isn't useful otherwise, Marcus said. I live here. He gestured at the apartment. I eat food. I buy books. Beyond that, what's the point of having it? It's just numbers in an account. But for someone drowning in debt, it's freedom. It's life. That seems like a better use. Kessa felt something crack in her chest. For months she'd been drowning. The debt had been a weight pressing down on her, crushing everything that made her who she was. She'd lost her position, her home, her dignity. She'd stood on that platform today prepared to lose her freedom. And this human, this strange man in dirty coveralls, had brought her out of it without even knowing her name. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, and was horrified to hear her voice break. In the auction house. Why did you let me think that I was a janitor? Marcus's expression softened slightly. You made that assumption yourself, and you treated me accordingly. Shame flooded through Kessa, hot and acidic. She remembered her tone, dismissive and aristocratic. The way she'd gestured him away like he was dirt. She'd mocked him, laughed at the idea that he could bid on anything. I'm sorry, she whispered. Are you? Sorry that you misjudged me? Or sorry that you showed who you really are? The question was asked gently, but it landed like a blow. Kessa's crest feathers flattened completely. That's not who I am. I was stressed. I was scared. We're always most ourselves when we're stressed and scared, Marcus said. That's when the veneer falls away. I'm not telling you this to be cruel, Kessa. I'm telling you because you need to hear it. You judged me based on my appearance, decided I was lesser than you because of how I dressed. You're right. The words tasted bitter, but they were true. You're absolutely right. I was arrogant and cruel, and you didn't deserve it. Marcus studied her for a long moment. The fact that you can admit that is promising. Does it matter? You own my contract. You can do whatever you want with me for the next 5 years. I don't own you, Marcus corrected. I own a contract that says you owe 5 years of labor, but I don't actually need labor. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to live here, in the guest room, rent-free. You're going to figure out what you want to do with your life, and in 5 years, when the contract expires, you're going to walk away with no debt, and, hopefully, a better future." Kessa stared at him. "That's it? You paid 200,000 credits for me to just live here? Think of it as a scholarship, a very expensive, legally complicated scholarship. But what if I want to work? I can't just accept charity." "It's not charity. I'm extremely wealthy and extremely bored, and this seemed interesting." Marcus finished his tea. "But if it makes you feel better, you can help me with something." "Anything," Kessa said immediately. "I fund a lot of projects. Legal campaigns, business investments, debt relief programs. Most of it's run through intermediaries and shell companies to maintain anonymity, but it's getting complex. I could use someone with diplomatic training to help coordinate, someone who speaks 17 languages and knows how to navigate bureaucracies." Kessa felt her heart rate pick up. "Real work, meaningful work. I can do that." "Good. We'll start tomorrow. Tonight, get settled. Your room's through there. The door locks if you want privacy, but you don't need to worry about me. I'm—" He paused, seeming to search for the right word. "Safe, I promise." And strangely, despite everything, the bizarre circumstances, the incomprehensible wealth, the deliberate shabbiness, Kessa believed him. She retreated to the guest room, which was small but comfortable, with a window overlooking the city. She set down her single bag and sat on the bed, her mind spinning. She'd been prepared for the worst: brutal labor in the asteroids, demeaning service work, the slow erosion of everything she'd been. Instead, she'd been bought by an eccentric billionaire who apparently spent his fortune saving strangers and lived like a graduate student. Her datapad chimed. A message from an unknown sender. "Welcome to your first day of freedom." Kessa laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Freedom. She was contracted to a human for 5 years, but somehow she felt freer than she had in months. The next morning, Kessa woke to the smell of coffee and something burning. She emerged from her room to find Marcus in the kitchen, staring at a smoking pan with an expression of mild concern. "I think I killed breakfast," he announced. "What were you trying to make?" "Eggs. They seemed simple in theory." Marcus poked at the charred mass with a spatula. "In practice, they require more attention than I gave them." Kessa moved him aside with one wing. "Let me. This is clearly a survival situation." She salvaged what she could and started fresh eggs in a clean pan. Marcus watched with the fascination of someone witnessing magic. "How are you this bad at cooking?" Kessa asked. "You live alone." "Delivery services are very advanced these days." They ate breakfast together, and then Marcus led her to what he called his office, which was actually the apartment's second bathroom, repurposed. The bathtub was filled with file boxes. The sink counter held 3 monitors. A standing desk had been crammed in where the shower used to be. "This is horrifying," Kessa said. "It's efficient. Everything's in arm's reach." "It's a bathroom. Former bathroom. Now it's a command center." Marcus woke up the monitors, and they blazed to life with spreadsheets, financial reports, and what looked like dossiers on various corporations. "I've been tracking a labor contractor in the Deneb system. They specialize in immigrant workers, mostly refugees who don't understand local laws. They're burying people in debt and then offering generous payment plans that amount to indentured servitude." Kessa studied the data, her diplomatic training kicking in. "You want to drive them out of business?" "I want to bury them, but it needs to be legal. That's where things get complicated." They worked through the morning, Kessa asking questions, Marcus explaining his various operations. She was stunned by the scope. He had investments in 47 different systems, most of them designed to either help struggling businesses or undermine exploitative ones. He funded legal aid societies, lobbied for worker protection laws, and ran an anonymous scholarship program that had put 3,000 aliens through university. "This is incredible," Kessa breathed, scrolling through a database of his charitable projects. You've changed millions of lives. That's the idea. But no one knows it's you. That's also the idea. Marcus leaned back in his chair. The moment people know, it becomes about me. Rich guy playing savior. The attention shifts from the problems to the person solving them. I don't want that. I just want the problems fixed. Kessa understood, but she also saw the loneliness in it. Marcus Webb lived in a modest apartment, wore coveralls, and had apparently given away enough money to buy a small moon. And no one knew. No one thanked him. He existed in the margins, invisible and unremarkable. It seems lonely, she said quietly. Marcus glanced at her, surprised. Sometimes. But it's necessary. They worked through lunch, ordering delivery. Kessa found herself enjoying the puzzle of it, tracing corporate structures and finding weak points. Her diplomatic training made her good at understanding cultural contexts, which regulations would work in which systems, which arguments would resonate with which populations. You're good at this, Marcus said, watching her draft a proposal for a worker protection law in the Centauri Collective. I was a good diplomat, Kessa replied, before everything fell apart. What happened? If you don't mind talking about it. Kessa was quiet for a moment. My mother got sick. Feather blight. It's rare, usually genetic. The treatment is experimental and expensive. I had good insurance through the diplomatic corps, but the experimental designation meant it wasn't covered. I paid out of pocket, drained my savings, took out loans. She lived for 6 more months, quality months, because of the treatment. But then she died, and I had this massive debt. And the Corps wouldn't help because I'd violated some clause about unauthorized medical expenditures. That's unconscionable. That's legal, Kessa corrected bitterly. I fought it, lost my position in the process because I was distracted, missed important meetings. The debt grew with interest. Eventually, the guild came calling, and you know the rest. Marcus was quiet. Then he said, Your mother, was it worth it? The 6 months? Yes, Kessa said without hesitation. She was herself during that time. She wasn't in pain. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. She told me stories about her life I'd never heard. She met some of her friends, said her goodbyes on her terms. It was worth every credit. Then you made the right choice, Marcus said firmly. The system that punished you for it is wrong, not you. Something in Kessa's chest loosened. She'd been carrying guilt along with the debt, wondering if she'd been foolish, if she should have just let her mother go instead of bankrupting herself for 6 more months. But Marcus understood. He'd lost his mother to debt too. He knew the weight of it. They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Kessa handled the cultural and diplomatic aspects of Marcus's various projects. She coordinated with his network of lawyers and activists, translated documents, navigated bureaucratic systems. Marcus handled the financial side, moving money around like a grandmaster playing chess. They worked well together. Marcus's strategic mind, paired with Kessa's cultural knowledge, created something formidable. Within a month, they dismantled the exploitative labor contractor in Deneb, funded a legal aid expansion in 3 systems, and helped pass new debt relief legislation on 2 core worlds. And slowly, Kessa began to see the real Marcus Webb. Not the shabby janitor or the secret billionaire, but the person beneath both masks. He was kind, genuinely kind, in ways that went beyond the money. He remembered small details about people, the names of the lawyers' children, the dietary restrictions of their contacts. He sent anonymous gifts when someone in their network had a birthday or a personal crisis. He worked 18-hour days, but never complained. He was also damaged. Sometimes Kessa would find him staring at nothing, his expression distant and sad. She learned those were the days when he was thinking about his mother. On those days, she made tea without asking and sat with him in comfortable silence. One evening, about 2 months into her contract, Kessa found Marcus on the apartment's small balcony, staring at the city lights. "Can't sleep," she asked. Thinking, Marcus replied. He was wearing his coveralls, as always, despite the fact that it was late and they'd been home for hours. She'd learned it wasn't an affectation. He genuinely found them comfortable. About? You, your contract, the whole system. Marcus turned to look at her. It bothers me that I own your labor. Even if I'm not using it in the traditional sense, the power dynamic is wrong. I can say I'm not your master, but legally I am. You can't leave. You can't refuse. Even if I never exercise that power, it exists. Kessa joined him at the railing. The evening air ruffled her feathers pleasantly. I could leave, she said. Not legally. Who would stop me? You? She made a sound that was almost a laugh. You've given me my own room, meaningful work, and complete autonomy. I stay because I want to, not because I have to. But the contract is a piece of paper. Marcus, you paid my debt in full. You didn't have to do that. You could have purchased the contract at market rate, let the guild keep the difference, and I'd still be legally bound to you. But you cleared the whole debt because it was the right thing to do. You've spent months treating me as an equal, a partner. The contract might say you own my labor, but you've never acted like it. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I wanted to tell you something, he said finally. That day at the auction, when you told me to leave, when you assumed I was there to clean. You weren't wrong to judge me based on my appearance. Of course I was. You were wrong morally, Marcus continued, but evolutionarily, strategically, you were doing what makes sense, assessing threats and allies based on available information. I deliberately present myself as non-threatening, as unimportant. That's a choice I make, so when people dismiss me, I don't have the right to be offended. I'm getting exactly what I aimed for. But I was cruel about it, Kessa insisted. You were scared. People being sold into labor contracts are allowed to be less than their best selves. Marcus smiled slightly. I told you that first day that you showed who you really are when you're stressed. I was being harsh. The truth is, we're all complicated. You were arrogant and dismissive that day. You've been thoughtful and kind every day since. Both versions are real. The question is which one you choose to be. Kessa felt her throat tighten. You're an unusual person, Marcus Webb. I've been told that. He turned back to the city. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here, not as a contracted worker, as a person. You've made this work easier, made my life less lonely. So thank you. You paid 200,000 credits for my company. That seems excessive. Best money I've ever spent, Marcus said, and Kessa couldn't tell if he was joking. Things changed after that conversation, though Kessa couldn't quite articulate how. They were still partners in Marcus's various projects. They still worked out of his bathroom office, still ordered too much takeout, still argued about the ethics of market manipulation versus direct intervention. But Kessa found herself noticing things. The way Marcus's eyes crinkled when he was genuinely amused versus his polite smile. The careful way he moved through the world, as if constantly trying not to take up too much space. The fact that he owned 3 pairs of identical coveralls and rotated them on a schedule. She noticed when her heart rate picked up when he walked into a room. Noticed that she started brewing his tea before he asked for it. Noticed that she stayed up later than necessary, working beside him, just to have his presence nearby. This was a problem. She was contracted to him for 4 more years. The power dynamic was, as he'd said, inherently unbalanced. She couldn't pursue this, couldn't even acknowledge it. It would be unfair to him, putting him in an impossible position. And it would be foolish for her, potentially mistaking gratitude and proximity for genuine feeling. But the heart, Kessa was learning, didn't care about logic. 3 months into her contract, everything came crashing down. Kessa was working through correspondence when an urgent message came through on the secure channel. One of their legal contacts in the Deneb system panicked and garbled. They know, they figured it out, they're coming. Marcus went very still when Kessa showed him the message. Who knows what? The answer came 20 minutes later when Kessa's old employer, the Aetherian Diplomatic Corps, issued a public statement. Apparently, an investigation into illegal financial manipulation had uncovered a pattern of market interference designed to undermine legitimate businesses across the sector. The investigation had led to a name, Marcus Webb. The media, always hungry for a story, descended like scavengers. Within hours, Marcus's face, shabby, unremarkable Marcus Webb, was on every news feed. The secret billionaire, they called him, the phantom philanthropist. Some outlets praised him. Others accused him of playing God, of manipulating economies for his own amusement, of using his wealth to impose his personal morality on the sector. The Aetherian government, embarrassed that one of their own diplomatic attachés was now publicly associated with this scandal, demanded Kessa's immediate return for questioning. Marcus sat in his living room, surrounded by screens showing his face, his history, his projects, all of it splashed across public consciousness. The anonymity he'd carefully maintained for over a decade was gone. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I knew this was a risk. I should have been more careful." "This isn't your fault," Kessa said fiercely, "and I'm not going back to them. They cast me out. They have no authority over me now. They can make things difficult for both of us. Let them try." The next few days were chaos. Lawyers, journalists, government officials, all demanding answers, interviews, explanations. Marcus handled it with the same mild patience he brought to everything else, which only seemed to frustrate people more. "Don't you understand how serious this is?" one Aetherian official demanded during a video conference. "You've manipulated markets across 17 systems." "I've invested in markets," Marcus corrected. "All legally. I have an excellent legal team. They're very thorough. You've targeted Aetherian businesses specifically. I've targeted exploitative businesses. If a disproportionate number happen to be Aetherian, perhaps your government should examine why that is." Kessa watched him deflect and redirect with professional skill. He was good at this, she realized. Not just the financial strategy, but the social chess. He'd been underestimated his entire life. He knew how to use it, but she also saw the cost, the tension in his shoulders, the way he retreated to the balcony more frequently, staring at the city with that distant, sad expression. On the fourth night of the media storm, Kessa found him there again. He'd been in meetings for 14 hours straight. "You should rest," she said. "Can't. Too much to manage." "Marcus." She touched his arm gently, the first time she deliberately initiated contact. "You're exhausted. The galaxy isn't going to collapse if you sleep for 6 hours. "Feels like it might," he muttered. But he let her guide him inside, let her make him tea and sit him down on the couch. "I've been thinking," Kessa said, "about your anonymity, about why it mattered to you." "It mattered because when people know, they make it about you," Kessa finished. "I know, but Marcus, maybe that's not entirely bad." He looked at her, exhaustion making his face more readable than usual. "You've spent 12 years hiding," Kessa continued, "operating in shadows because you didn't want attention, didn't want to be seen as some wealthy savior. That's admirable, but it's also lonely, and it means that when you do good things, people don't connect them to a person. They're just random good fortune, unexplained relief. That's what I wanted. Is it what you needed?" Kessa settled beside him. "You've changed millions of lives. Maybe it's time to let people thank you. Let them know that kindness isn't random chance, it's choice. Your choice." Marcus was quiet for a long time. What if they expect things? What if now that they know, everyone comes asking for help? Then you help the ones you can, and you explain your limits to the rest. You're one person, Marcus. A person with extraordinary resources, yes, but still just a person. You don't have to save everyone. Feels like I should try, and that's exactly why people should know your name. Kessa let her wing rest against his shoulder, a gesture of comfort in her species. Because the person doing all this good is someone who feels guilty when he can't save everyone. That's worth recognizing. Worth celebrating. Marcus leaned into her touch just slightly. When did you get so wise? I was always wise. You were just distracted by my arrogance. He laughed, a real laugh, and some of the tension left his frame. They sat together in comfortable silence, the city humming beyond the windows. Kessa, Marcus said eventually, your contract, I'm going to void it. Her heart jumped. What? The Etherian government wants you back for questioning. If you're contracted to me, they can make the argument that I'm using you as an asset, hiding you from legitimate investigation. But if you're free, if there's no legal connection between us, you can tell them to go to hell on your own terms. But the debt is cleared. The contract was always just a legal framework. I'm filing dissolution papers tomorrow. You'll be free. Free. The word should have filled Kessa with joy. Instead, she felt panic rising in her chest. What if I don't want to be free? The words came out before she could stop them. Marcus looked at her, confusion clear on his face. What? The contract might have started as an obligation, but it's not anymore. It's employment, it's partnership, it's... She couldn't say what it really was. It's something I want. Don't take that away because you're trying to protect me. Kessa, you don't understand. If you're legally bound to me, then I'm legally bound to you. Let the Etherians complain. Let them investigate. I'm not running from them, and I'm not leaving you. Why? Marcus asked, and there was something raw in his voice. Why would you stay? Because I'm falling in love with you, Kessa thought. Because you're the kindest person I've ever met. Because you saved me and didn't ask for anything in return. Because you wear ridiculous coveralls and live in a modest apartment despite having more money than sense. Because you make terrible eggs and excellent tea. Because you're lonely and brilliant and damaged and good. But she couldn't say any of that. Not with the power dynamic between them, not with the contract still in place. So instead she said, because the work matters. And because you're my friend. Marcus studied her face for a long moment. She wondered what he saw there, if her feelings were as obvious as they felt. Okay, he said finally. The contract stays. For now. But Kessa, if you ever want out, for any reason, you just have to ask. I mean that. I know, she said. I trust you. They navigated the media storm together. Marcus gave a single interview, carefully controlled, in which he explained his philosophy. The money was meaningless without purpose. The purpose was reducing suffering. The method was strategic investment and intervention. He made no apologies. Public opinion was split. Some celebrated him as a hero, others condemned him as a manipulator. Most people, Kessa noticed, just wanted to know why a billionaire dressed like a janitor. It's comfortable, Marcus said in the interview, with such genuine confusion at the question that it became a meme within hours. The Etherian government demanded Kessa's presence for questioning. She went, with Marcus's lawyers, and spent 4 hours explaining that yes, she worked for Marcus Webb. Yes, she'd helped coordinate his various projects. No, she wasn't being coerced. No, she didn't consider herself a victim. Yes, she was aware she was contracted to him. No, she didn't see that as a problem. You were a diplomat, the lead investigator said, frustration evident. You had a promising career. And now you're a contracted laborer working for a human who's manipulated markets across the sector. I had a career, Kessa corrected, until I needed help and the Corps abandoned me. Marcus Webb bought me out of a debt slavery auction and gave me meaningful work. So yes, I'm choosing to stay with the human because he's a better person than every official in this room. The investigation found nothing illegal. Marcus's lawyers were, as he'd said, very thorough, but the scrutiny didn't stop. Every investment, every project, every donation was now public knowledge. Marcus handled it with patience, but Kessa saw the toll it took. 6 months into her contract, on a quiet evening after a particularly brutal day of depositions, Marcus made dinner. Actual dinner, not takeout. It was barely edible, but Kessa appreciated the effort. I've been thinking about what you said, Marcus told her as they ate his overcooked pasta. about letting people thank me, about connecting the good fortune to a person. And it's uncomfortable. But you were right. People are reaching out, telling me stories about how the anonymous debt payments or the scholarship program changed their lives. And it means something to hear that, to know it mattered. Of course it mattered. I always assumed it did, but assuming and knowing are different. Marcus pushed pasta around his plate. One of the messages was from a woman whose mother I helped 5 years ago. Medical debt, similar to your situation. She said her mother got 3 more years because of the treatment the debt relief allowed. 3 years, that mattered. Kessa saw the shine in his eyes and reached across the table to take his hand. He didn't pull away. "You're continuing your mother's life," she said softly. "Every person you help, every family you keep together, that's her legacy too. She'd be proud of you." "I hope so." Marcus's hand tightened around hers. "Kessa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest, even if you think it's not what I want to hear." "All right. Are you happy? Here, with this work, with this arrangement?" "Yes," Kessa said immediately. "Genuinely, yes. Not just because of the contract. Not out of obligation or gratitude. The contract is the excuse," Kessa admitted. "The reason I stay is because I want to." Marcus was quiet. His hand was still holding hers, warm and solid. "I'm going to void the contract," he said. Kessa's heart plummeted. "Marcus, let me finish. I'm voiding it because I don't want you here out of obligation, even theoretical obligation. I want you here because you choose to be. So I'm going to end the contract, clear you of all legal obligation to me, and then I'm going to ask if you want to stay anyway, as my employee, properly paid, as my partner in this work, as my friend." He paused, and Kessa saw something vulnerable in his expression. "And maybe," he continued quietly, "eventually, as something more than that, if you're interested, if the power dynamic being gone makes that something you'd consider." Kessa forgot how to breathe. "Something more?" "I know the timing is terrible," Marcus said in a rush, "and I know I'm probably misreading the situation. I've never been good at this kind of thing, but you've become the most important person in my life, and I needed you to know that before we cleared the contract, so that you'd know it's not about obligation on either side. It's about—" Kessa kissed him. It was awkward. The biology between their species made kissing imperfect at best, but Marcus caught on quickly, his hand coming up to cup the side of her face, careful of her feathers. When they broke apart, he was staring at her with wonder. "I've wanted to do that for months," Kessa admitted, "but the contract made it impossible. I know. That's why it has to go." "And then? And then you decide what you want. Stay or go. As an employee, a friend, or—" He trailed off, hope and fear warring in his expression. "Partner," Kessa said firmly, "in every sense of the word. If you'll have me." Marcus smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Not the mild mask he showed the world, but genuine joy. "I'd like that. Very much." They filed the contract dissolution the next day. The Etherian government, deprived of their main line of attack, issued a statement condemning reckless financial manipulation, but took no further action. The media moved on to other stories. Life gradually returned to something resembling normal, except Kessa's life was nothing like it had been before. She stayed in the apartment, not as a contracted laborer, but as Marcus's partner. They worked together, coordinating his various projects, expanding their reach. They started a foundation, properly organized, to make the work sustainable. Marcus hired staff, and Kessa helped build a team of people who shared their vision. The coveralls stayed. Kessa had given up trying to convince Marcus to dress appropriately. He was comfortable, and that mattered more than appearance. They were careful with their relationship, taking things slowly. The power dynamic might be legally gone, but the shadow of it remained. They talked about it extensively, set boundaries, made sure they were choosing each other freely, not out of habit or proximity or gratitude, and gradually, certainly, they built something real. 1 year after the auction, Kessa woke up in Marcus's bed. In their bed, really, since she'd officially moved into the master bedroom 3 months prior. Marcus was already awake, staring at his datapad with that focused intensity that meant he was planning something. "What are you plotting?" she asked, sleep still fuzzing her voice. "Hostile takeover of a pharmaceutical company that's price-gouging life-saving medication. Before breakfast?" "It's important breakfast." Kessa laughed and nestled closer to him. His arm came around her automatically, datapad balanced in his other hand. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "How we met? The circumstances?" Kessa considered. A year ago, she'd been standing on an auction block, her entire life condensed into a debt number. She'd been terrified, humiliated, broken. Now she was here, doing work that mattered, with a person who valued her. She'd helped change legislation that would prevent thousands from facing what she'd faced. She'd coordinated debt relief for families drowning in medical bills. She'd fought corporations and governments and won. And she'd fallen in love with a strange, kind man who wore coveralls and gave away fortunes. "No," she said, "I don't regret it. I wish the circumstances had been different. I wish the system that put me there didn't exist. But I don't regret that it led me to you." Marcus set down the datapad and kissed her properly, his hand gentle on her crest feathers. "I paid 200,000 credits for the best thing that ever happened to me. That's got to be the best investment I've ever made." "You're a terrible businessman," Kessa informed him. "I'm an excellent businessman. I just have good priorities." They got up eventually, made breakfast together, Kessa cooking, Marcus providing unhelpful commentary, and settled in for another day of trying to fix a broken system, one strategic investment at a time. It was a good life. Strange, certainly. Unconventional, absolutely. But good. And when the next auction notice came across their feeds, another desperate soul being sold to pay debts they couldn't afford, Marcus looked at Kessa and raised an eyebrow. She pulled up the registration system. "Let's see who we can save today," she said. Together they got to work.